When the archaeologists realized that a straight ramp would never work, they came up with the idea of a spiral ramp winding around the pyramid. That would eliminate the need for those huge amounts of building material and building time. So, problem solved? Nope. They were utterly wrong again. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today I will explain why a spiral ramp and its variants also won't work. While a spiral ramp uses much less additional building material than a straight ramp, it still uses a significant amount of additional material. And there are a few things that are probably not too obvious. We will have to build the ramp out of stone because we want the side of the ramp to be vertical in order to maximize the height up to which we can build the ramp without standing on the previous round of the ramp, blocking the path. And we also will have to lay some of the casing stones as square blocks because our ramp needs something to stand upon. The width of the ramp is also very important because doubling the width would increase the volume of the ramp by a factor of 4. The most common argument against the spiral ramp is that it would obscure the edges of the pyramid. Those edges will have to meet in the pyramidion in the end, so they have to be monitored continuously and as precisely as possible. Another point that the archaeologists came up with all by themselves is that you cannot move the largest blocks on that ramp. Let's take the largest granite block in the ceiling of the king's chamber as an example. It weighs 72 tons. If 30 workers are enough to pull your average 2.6 ton stone, for that granite block you will need some 900 workers on the pulling team. And if you arrange them in rows of 2 and give each worker a space of 1 meter, that pulling team will be 450 meters long. Even if you arrange them in rows of 4, it will still be 225 meters. So before the stone even moves, the first workers will fall off the cliff. So they suggested that all those large blocks would be delivered to level 0 of the pyramid and levered up layer by layer as the pyramid rises in height. And yes, that would work. While this is pretty awkward and a huge amount of additional work, it would also mean that you have to order all those large stones and transport them to the pyramid before you can really start building the pyramid. A point that I never saw being discussed is how to get around the corners of a spiral ramp. No, I'm not talking about turning the stone and sledge by 90 degrees. Some people like Rudolf suggest to use cranes, but it's much easier than that. You simply take a small stone and after levering the sledge a little bit up, you shove that little stone with a pointy or at least round edge under the large stone as close to the center of gravity as you possibly can. And if you now let the big stone down again, it should be pretty well balanced on that small stone, so you can easily turn it by 90 degrees. So if turning the stone is easy, the difficult part is to get the whole team around the corner. If you have your average stone with a pulling team of 30 workers, rows of 2, 1 meter each, when the first worker reaches the corner, your sledge will still be more than 15 meters away from the point where you want to turn it. And there is no way to shove it up there. So what can you do? At the alabaster quarry at Hatnoop, hope I didn't butcher that name too much, A team of archaeologists just recently excavated a well-preserved ramp. It was rather steep, some 20%, and it had staircases on both sides and a row of post holes on both sides. So you could attach a rope to the stone on the sledge, put it around one of the posts, and pull downwards or downhill on the staircase. They could have also pulled straight from the upper part of the ramp or sideways around the upmost pole, but they preferred to pull downhill. And that's probably because if you're pulling downhill, you can use some of your weight to help with the pulling. So if you have a pole on that corner, you could detach your pulling team from the sledge, take a much longer rope, put it around that pole, have your pulling team walk down behind the sledge, attached to that long rope, and pull the stone on the sledge up. Turn the stone, have your pulling team walk up around the corner, and reattach to the sledge with a short rope, and continue to pull the sledge up. How long would all that take? I guess about 5 or 6 minutes. You can think about optimizing that a little bit by having a second team waiting already there with the long rope. But you still have to switch the ropes, pull the stone, turn the stone, reattach the stone, and having 60 workers on a stretch of some 50 meters of ramp, pretty crowded. But okay, let's go with 4 minutes for that maneuver. If that process takes 4 minutes, that's also the maximum speed at which you can deliver stones. And you probably remember that in order to finish the pyramid in 20 years, we have to deliver one stone every 2 minutes all year long. So that's why somebody came up with the idea of 4 spiral ramps, one starting at each corner. So we're back to 1 stone every minute. It has the disadvantage that half of the stones have to be pulled some 230 meters more to the northern side of the pyramid, but so what? But then there's also the theory that the pharaoh didn't have access to the whole workforce all year long. Instead, only for the peak of the Nile flood, some 3 months a year. That would mean we're back to 1 stone every 4 minutes. And that's why somebody else came up with a multi-spiral ramp theory. 1 starting at each corner and 1 starting in the middle of each side of the pyramid. So we're back to 1 stone every minute over the year. But so the pyramid would be cluttered with ramps. I'll let you decide if you want that. We would also have to abandon some of the ramps as the pyramid rises in height, but that's not really a problem because at a height of 30 meters we have already built 50% of the pyramid, so in the upper part we can relax the speed a little bit. And then there is the final challenge of putting the pyramidion on top of the pyramid. As the height of the pyramid approaches the top, 2 things will happen. As I pointed out earlier on in this video, for a given width of the ramp, you will need a certain height above the previous round of the spiral ramp. And that distance will become shorter and shorter. And likewise, the length of the side of 1 round will become shorter too. Up in the top of the pyramid, stones are usually much smaller than your average stone, so your pulling team will also become shorter and shorter. But with a normal setup of say 2 meters in width and 8-degree slope, the method will stop working at around 20 or 50 meters below the top. So you either have to switch to a completely different method or set the parameters much more aggressively, like making the ramp much narrower and much more steep. And I'm not sure if that will work. That's it for today. Please like, share and subscribe, hit the bell icon and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.